Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap-up. So in the month of June, I read a total of 6 books, and let's just go ahead and talk about them. So the first book that I read in the month of June was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This was a reread. I'm doing a reread of the entire series in preparation for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I recently purchased and I'm looking forward to reading, but I just wanted to refresh this story in my head. And I also haven't read it since the first time I read it, which was many years ago when all of the books were just out. So yeah, I wanted to see if I would still like it. I really enjoyed reading The Hunger Games again. This is probably the closest book to movie adaptation out of the entire trilogy, because now that I'm reading Catching Fire, I'm definitely picking up on more details that are not in the movie, that are in the book, but this one is quite close to the movie, but it still has bits and pieces that I forgot about. Especially there was one at the end that I was shocked about, and I was actually telling my best friend because I completely forgot about that detail that was very horrifying in the book, and they just kind of didn't include it in the movies. But if you're wondering whether or not Hunger Games are as good as they were if you read them many years ago, they still are. I do believe this series is a new classic and it's gonna stand the test of time. It's so well written, and it's a dystopian that kind of started the dystopian craze many years ago now, and for good reason. I don't want to blabber on. I think everyone knows what The Hunger Games is about, so yeah, if you haven't read the books for some reason, check them out because they're really good. Especially the second and the third book, they include a lot of the details that are not in the movies. So if you like getting a more in-depth look into the adapted works, I would recommend these ones. Yeah. So the next book that I finished in the month of June is The Kingdom of Bach by Marie Lu. Just as a quick synopsis, this book is about Mozart's older sister, Nannerl, who was also a prodigy composer and musician, and she was basically kind of forgotten in history. I don't think many people know about her. I surely didn't until I read this book and I learned about this book. But yeah, she was definitely deserving of more attention. But yeah, basically in this book we follow her story of how she is writing music and performing, but the struggles that she's facing because she's a girl, but while her younger brother Wolfgang is constantly praised and given all the attention, she's kind of told to sit back and give her brother the room to shine because she's a girl, and for some reason women are basically not allowed to be musicians and kind of make a living and compose. Her father is very against her composing her own work, and basically amidst all of that, her brother and her, they come up with this magical story of the Kingdom of Bach. They imagine this kingdom with the magical creatures that live in it, and it kind of starts coming to life. They basically start being visited by this prince of the kingdom, and he starts giving Nannerl different tasks to complete in order for her to not be forgotten in history, and it kind of goes from there. So this is like a magical realism historical fiction book, and it was definitely magical and beautiful, and I really enjoyed seeing how Nannerl was basically treated. I mean, I obviously didn't enjoy it, it infuriated me, but I like learning about how women were treated in history and just seeing the struggles that they went through. And I definitely felt really bad about what Nannerl had to go through and how she had to fight for her right to be a musician and to compose. And her father was just one of the most hated characters for me. I passionately hate that man, and I don't know if he was like that in real life. Yeah, but the character that was her father, I hated so much. Honestly, so infuriating. My blood starts boiling when I think about him. I think I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I definitely had much higher expectations going into it because I saw Jenin raving about this book. Jen from This Story Ain't Over. I will leave her channel link down below, but we have very similar reading tastes with her, so I really trust her opinion on books when she recommends something, because it's crazy how similar we think about the same books. So I was looking forward to this book because before I saw her videos, I haven't heard of this book, and I was so excited going into it. I thought I was gonna love it because Jenny loved it, but I guess that's kind of what prevented me from enjoying the book as much, because I had such high expectations that I was ultimately let down, not because the book was bad, but because of my expectations going into it. I would still highly recommend this book. Yeah, I think it's a good story. I just think if you don't really like magical realism or historical fiction that is kind of reads a little bit younger, because it's about children essentially, because they are children for the most part throughout the books. If you're not into that type of stuff, be cautious, because it definitely reads a little bit younger and a little bit more magical, whimsical. And when I was reading this book, I was just thinking, man, maybe magical realism is just not my genre, because I was not enjoying the magical realism as much as I wished. I just wanted full-on fantasy or no magic at all, but not this weird in between. So yeah, if you like magical realism, would highly recommend this book. I think this book would be really nice. But if you're not a big fan of magical realism, just be cautious, but still read this book, because I think non-real story is important and it deserves the attention. And the next book that I read in June was Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the second book to the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. It has 4 books in total. I think the 4th one either comes out soon or has already come out. I'm not gonna go into what this book specifically is about, because it does spoil some events from the first book. But basically, the series is kind of about Audrey Rose, who is an apprentice to her uncle, who is a mortician. So she's a woman in 1800s who is basically pursuing a career that is very unladylike and frowned upon in general, but specifically for women. So she has to confront and kind of deal with a lot of hatred and kind of just people basically judging her for how she is and her views. The first book follows her journey together with her apprentice colleague, Thomas Creswell, and them basically trying to figure out who's murdering women in London and taking out their organs, and they're kind of trying to solve this mystery. And the second book, obviously, it's called Hunting Prince Dracula, so it has something to do with Dracula. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say anything else. But yeah, this is a really nice, fun series that is like YA historical fiction, but has a very strong feminist vibe to it. But yeah, I really enjoy following our 2 main characters and kind of how they work together. They have really fun banter, and it's really interesting to see 2 characters who have really progressive views but who live in the 1800s, and kind of how they struggle against the society's expectations. Yeah, would highly recommend it for that. Overall, really fun YA historical fiction. And I think I gave Hunting Prince Dracula maybe 4.5 stars. So the next book I read in the month of June was Blanca Yelloha by Anna Marie McLemore. This book is about 2 sisters who are completely different. Blanca is kind of like this blonde, lighter skinned sister who is perfect, and she's kind of like this princess, and she's a little bit older than Roja. I think she's like a year older. And Roja is basically kind of considered like a cursed child. She is darker skinned, she has bright red hair, which everyone sees as a curse, and overall she's just not as pleasant and perfect as Blanca, quote unquote. But basically their family is cursed, so that with every generation one of the sisters is basically taken by the swans and turned into a swan. So with every generation, there's always 2 sisters, no matter what. They have reached the age where the swans are supposed to come and choose a sister, and it's kind of like this whole big thing, and everyone is preparing for that. I don't want to say much more. This book is definitely very unique and interesting. It's magical realism, and it has really good representation. One of our main characters is non-binary, and I really enjoyed seeing their perspective, and kind of they really do go into how they feel and kind of their experience being non-binary, which was surprising. I didn't know that this was going to be part of the book, but it was very interesting, and I really like how it was normalized. It was really nice to see their perspective and their story and learn. I definitely learned a lot just from their perspective. And Anna Marie McLemore is also, I think, non-binary. Anna Marie McLemore also goes by the pronoun they, so they are non-binary, they identify as non-binary, so it was very nice seeing the representation, kind of own voices representation about that, because I don't think I've ever read from the perspective of a non-binary character. This book has 4 main characters, by the way, and I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it like a 3.75, 4 stars. I wasn't blown away, but I think it's also because at the beginning of the book I was really not enjoying it as much. I was kind of confused, and this book does start off confusing, and you kind of don't know what's happening, you don't know where anything is going, but by the end of the book I really enjoyed it. I think the end of the book is definitely like a strong 4.5 stars for me, so I would highly recommend checking this one out. It's a good magical realism book that explores familial relationships, sisterly relationships, and I would recommend checking this book out if you haven't before. And I'm definitely interested in reading more of Anna Marie McLemore's works, so yeah.
Hey guys, Editing Christina here. I just realized that I didn't include one book that I read in my June wrap-up, and that one is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I gave this book 3.5 stars. So basically, this book is written in verse, and it's about this young boy whose brother just got murdered, and he decides to take revenge and takes his brother's gun and go and find the person he is sure killed his brother. And once he gets into the elevator, he starts going down, and on every floor he basically kind of sees this ghost of a person from his life who has died, and just kind of has a meaningful conversation. Think Mitch Albom's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven kind of thing, except this one is really quick. The audiobook is just roughly an hour, so I enjoyed Jason Reynolds' writing, and I want to start reading more books by Black, Indigenous, and person of color authors, and Jason Reynolds is definitely one of those that is pretty renowned. I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed Jason Reynolds' writing. The only thing is, I was so intrigued by the concept, but I think the delivery was not as good as I expected, just because I feel like there was a lot of room for starting a really meaningful, deep, detailed conversation regarding the never-ending cycle of violence and the Black experience, but I feel like because it was written in verse and it was just very short, it didn't go too in depth, and it was just very quick. So I was definitely missing depth in this book, and that's why I gave it 3.5 stars, not because it's a bad book, just because I wish there was more exploration, and just wish there was more of it. I still want to check out more works by Jason Reynolds. He has quite a few books out, and a lot of them sound exciting, so I'm probably going to be picking up some of his works later this year as well, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that I read this book as well in this month, so yeah. So now back to the regular video.
So the next book I read was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, which is a book about our main character, Liz Leidy, who is aiming to go into Ivy League school, I think, but she unfortunately doesn't receive the scholarship that she was relying on in order to go to the school, and she wouldn't be able to afford going unless she received the scholarship. And when she gets the news, she realizes that she has to do something in order to be able to go to her dream school. And in the town that she lives in, they basically give scholarships to people who win the king and queen of prom for their year. And so she comes up with a plan with her best friends to kind of become the prom queen. And overall, this book was just very ridiculous. It was very Riverdale-y, and kind of like it's drama. There were a lot of characters that I was just like, not realistic, very dramatic. And this book also has sapphic romance. That was very nice to see. I actually really enjoyed that aspect of the book, but overall I did find it kind of ridiculous. I think the book read a little younger, and overall it was just kind of too far-fetched for me, because I couldn't imagine anyone having this attitude toward prom where it's like such a big thing. And there was this adult character in the book who is a teacher, and she basically pretends to be French. She has a fake French accent and she speaks with the fake French accent all of the time. And even though everyone knows that she's not French, like everyone is aware, and when she's like, I don't know, angry or something, like when she's not watching herself, she will slip into her regular American accent. But yeah, she just pretends to have a French accent, and was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever read. Like, nobody in their right mind would ever do that, especially not a teacher. That's just ridiculous and far-fetched, and I don't think that would happen. But that was a thing, and it was actually quite prominent throughout the book, so I couldn't just forget about that aspect. And there were other aspects that were pretty ridiculous as well. So overall, it was just like, this is fun, but it's also so ridiculous and so dramatic. Like, it was overly dramatic, and because of that I just couldn't take this book too seriously. I did overall enjoy it. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars, but I've seen so many people hype up this book and everyone seems to love it and give it 5 stars, and I just don't see it. I don't understand why. I do understand that it has representation and the main character is black, and I do appreciate it for that. It's a book written by a black author and the main character is black, and the main character is also LGBTQ, and there are other LGBTQ characters in the book. And it does touch upon like homophobia and kind of the treatment of LGBTQIA plus community in this more suburban, rural town in America, where people are kind of still a little bit stuck in the past and kind of don't have such open minds. I liked that conversation, and I also liked the relationship of our main character with her brother, but I wanted to see more of that, and that was not a very prominent aspect of the book. The theme wasn't deeply explored, so I just wanted more from this book. I wanted more serious conversation. I wanted it to go more into the black experience and the LGBTQIA plus experience, especially in a more suburban town. I wanted more familial relationship explorations, but this book was just more on the fun, not too serious, not very deep side, and I'm just realizing that this is not the kind of book that I personally enjoy, but it doesn't mean that the book is bad. I definitely don't think the book is bad, and I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a fun contemporary YA romance. Like, this book is good. This book has good representation, obviously, as I mentioned, so I would recommend it for that. But if you're not a big contemporary reader, don't expect too much, because it's just a contemporary with good representation, basically, and it's very dramatic and ridiculous and reads younger. So I would recommend this book for like 15-16-year-olds. You know, I'm older than the target audience I think would be for this book. So the very last book that I read in June was Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. So this book follows our main character, who is basically left behind in the woods, and she's kind of trying to find her way back to civilization and survive, but she has to basically deal with a lot of the hardships that come along with being stranded in the woods without any supplies, without food. Going into this book, I'm pretty sure I was expecting something else, because I knew that it was about a character that is trying to survive in the woods, but I expected the main character to be kind of younger. Like, I was thinking that it was about a girl who was like 12 or 13, like a young teenager who was trying to survive and who wasn't equipped to survive. But this book was about a 17-year-old who swore a lot, and the reason why she got stranded in the woods was ridiculous and very teenagery. So that aspect definitely let me down, because I was going into the book thinking it was kind of like a middle grade-ish young teen book about trying to survive in the wilderness. But our main character was older and she acted much older. I thought that she was even older than she was. Like, I thought she was college age. She was also very skilled at being in the woods. Like, she knew all these hacks. She was familiar with like what you can eat and can't eat, and she spent like basically all of her life being in the woods and going into these woods. So it wasn't like a little kid thrown into the forest unequipped. She was an older teen who was more equipped than an average person to survive in the woods, and that's not what I expected. And I just didn't really enjoy the swearing in the book. I don't know if I can express my view on it clearly, because I understand why the character was swearing, because of all the frustration that she was experiencing being stranded in the woods for days. But it doesn't change the fact that I didn't enjoy it, just because that's not what I was expecting from the book. I really didn't enjoy why she ran away from her friends in the first place. I thought that was dramatic and ridiculous, and I thought that teenagers going out into the woods and doing whatever they want with alcohol, I was like, in what world does that happen? Maybe like, I guess my friend groups were like much more pure, but to me it was just, I was like, where does that happen? Like, what kind of teenagers and what kind of parents allow for that to happen? Maybe I guess I was raised in a more strict family, but that frustrated me. I was like, no teenagers would be allowed to go camp in the woods without adult supervision with alcohol. Where does that happen? That doesn't happen. It's not realistic. But there they were, and then she ran away because of this ridiculous reason. And I understand that they're teenagers, but I also don't understand, because I'm not a teenager, but even when I was a teenager, I don't think I was as dramatic and as teenagery, I guess. I think I was like more mature, and kind of going back to the same theme as like the previous book. Everything was just too far-fetched and dramatic, and I didn't enjoy that. I guess I just need to move toward reading more adult books, because YA is starting to annoy me at this point, and I don't like it, because a lot of my favorite books are YA, but maybe I'm growing out of it or something, because these books, I get annoyed by the main characters because they're so teenagery, and I'm like, I don't get you. Saying all this, I still liked the book. I still was interested in continuing listening to it. I listened to it on audiobook, and it was quite a fast read. I think I read it in 2 days maybe. It was enjoyable. There were things that I expected to happen that didn't happen, and there were definitely things that I didn't expect to happen that did happen. So overall, I was still surprised enough by certain aspects. I was disappointed by certain aspects, but overall, it was a middle of the road, kind of like 3.5. I would recommend it if you're specifically looking for a survivalist kind of story that is shorter, but is also not super fast paced. But yeah, if you're looking for that type of book, I would still recommend you check it out, because I had different expectations going into it. It's not the fault of the book, it's more my expectations. So yeah, overall, not a bad book by any means. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. If you're interested in checking any of those out further, I will leave the links to all of the books I mentioned in the video down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're staying safe and continuing supporting the Black Lives Movement and educating yourself. And I will see you in my next one.